Rico, Real Estate Investors Association of Puerto Rico. We're a year old. We started February of 2021, so we're a year old right now. This is actually our 11th meeting, though. We took a month off for last month for unforeseen circumstances. But yeah, thank you guys. This is Base Co-working. So if anyone doesn't know about this space, we can give you a tour. People can rent out space for co-working. It's a pretty it goes really far up and over there. It's really cool. It's a really cool space. So let me know if you guys want to take a look. We can do a tour. So most people know me. I'm Zachary. I've been here on the island just a little over a year. We pretty much got on the island immediately and started this group. And the whole purpose of this group is to bring value to the investment community, to the real estate community, the lenders, the real estate agents, appraisers, everyone, and try to bring it all into one central group where we can network, we can talk, we can exchange resources. So it's been pretty good. We're gonna have John Hyre. If anyone's familiar with him, he was a big inspiration for us moving here in the first place. He's a tax attorney, very knowledgeable in the Act 60 community. So just briefly schedule what we're going to do. The first thing is we're going to have a market report. Chris Riviera, EXP, he's going to do a market report about Puerto Rico, real estate, everything on the island when it comes to real estate. And then we're going to have forced networking. It's our favorite part, where we force everyone to network with each other. So after that, we're going to have John Hyre, then we're going to have questions and answers with him, which is really, he charges like $500 a question or something like that, so seriously. After that, needs and wants. I'm going to highlight a project that we're doing right now, a tokenization project, so stay tuned for that. And anyone else can kind of highlight their projects or anything that they need or want. Hopefully we can help them out with. So, and then that should be it. All right, guys, I want to introduce you to our co-founder here, Catherine Morea.
Thank you all for coming tonight. I'm kind of excited about this space, actually. I think it's a little easier to find, and maybe we'll keep using this space because it's got some equipment here and looks like it's pretty comfortable for everyone. So I think most of you know me. My name's Catherine. I came here from Santa Monica at the very end of 2020, and I was always a big proponent of real estate clubs. In California, I was part of many of them, and I just found it was a great way to connect with investors. Real estate investing can be a very lonely sport, depending on how you structure your deals, and all of the things I just did alone or with my ex-husband. So, you just kind of live in this bubble all by yourself, and when you start going to real estate clubs, you find out there are so many people that can connect you with things that you need in the industry. And so when I came here, I didn't find that right away, and I thought, well, if there isn't one, we should have one, because finding the lenders, finding the contractors, finding other people to partner with is just so much easier if you're in an environment where you plug in and connect with the other people in this industry. So that's why we did it, and it's been a lot of fun. I'm currently doing a bunch of deals with other people on the island now and enjoying Puerto Rico. So I want to ask, of the people here, who is here for the very first time at RIEA Rico tonight? Wow, okay. Well, thank you guys for coming, yeah. And how many people are brand new to real estate in general? Like they're a beginner in real estate? Okay, all right. Well, thank you guys, thanks for coming. I think hopefully you'll get some value out of this, and you'll meet other people that you can connect with that will be valuable in your journey and making more money and becoming successful in the real estate market. How many people here are currently looking for a project, a property, a partner, money, currently like actively looking? Okay. Okay. How many people here are already investing? They're already doing projects in Puerto Rico? Oh my God. Okay. Wow. Got a lot of successful people here. Okay, that's great. It's nice to be with doers and not just people who take classes and read books and never quite get out of the analysis paralysis. So there's definitely deals to be done here. And if you're one of the people that rose your hand and you have a deal and you're looking for a partner, you're looking for money, you're looking for a way to structure it, stay for the end, because that's when we do needs and wants. And so if you want to get up here on stage for a minute, just say what you're looking for. We're happy to, give you the floor space for a minute to do that. So let me see what else I've got here to cover. We're going to do a market report, and luckily this month we have Christopher Rivera. He is an EXP agent. I want to talk a little bit about him before he comes on stage. He has spent the last few years as a licensed realtor with EXP Realty. I'm also with EXP Realty, love the company, and if you want to learn about EXP, talk to one of us. He specializes in multi-million-dollar properties, housing developments, commercial, and he is also an ambassador for Philanthro Investor. They were our sponsor a couple months ago. And Crypto Realty Group. He's from Puerto Rico, and he joins us tonight with a market report about what's going on in Puerto Rico. All right, Christopher, give it up. All righty.
Thank you very much. Let's see how I do this. English is my second language, so I'm going to have this as an assignment. If you hear a word said incorrectly, feel free to correct me. All right? It's a good exercise for me. First, 2021, a record year for tourism. Last 2021 was a record year for tourism on the island, according to Discover Puerto Rico. Revenue from lodging surpassed $1 billion in 2021, a 37% increase from 2019 record. As a result, $98 million was collected in revenue from taxes on the short-term rentals. The past decade averaged $66 million annually from the same tax. Aerostar Airport Holdings found that 4.84 million passengers arrived at San Juan Airport in 2021, 2.6 higher than in 2019. These visitors are also staying longer, representing a 5% increase from 2019. Visitors stayed in Puerto Rico for an average of 4.6 days. So Airbnb is doing great in Puerto Rico. As jobs become remote or hybrid, people took advantage of the opportunity to truly work from anywhere. Airbnb rentals offer unique and individual options for an experience outside of the traditional hotels. The firm announced that over 92% of hosts in Puerto Rico are based on the island, and 26% even rent out spaces in their own home. So Puerto Ricans are making money in Airbnb in Puerto Rico, 92%. The autonomy that Airbnb provides each of its hosts results in benefits for the communities. 99% of hosts surveyed respond that they recommend local restaurants, cafes, stores, cultural sites, and attractions to the guests, who spend an average of $300 per day in a total at these destinations, according to Airbnb data. Destination analysis and independent research firms that survey American travelers weekly reported that 93.3% of Americans plan to take a leisure trip in the next 12 months as a result of the heightened optimism regarding the pandemic course and their ability to travel safely. Meanwhile, 37.3% of people planning on vacation for spring break choose beach destinations. That's us. In another one, Expedia report shows interest to travel to Puerto Rico up to 20%. Travel platform Expedia Group released in Expedia 2022 Travels Trend Report that showed, among other things, that during the first 15 days of 2022, the market in Puerto Rico has shown growth in several areas. The overall search interest to travel Puerto Rico is picking up, plus 20%. growth compared to 2020. Like 2020, the most researched destination in Condado, followed by Isla Verde, Carolina, Rio Grande, Fajardo, Old San Juan, and Dorado. Aligned to this, the average length of stay for some popular destinations like Rio Grande, Fajardo, or Dorado have grown 25% when compared to the same period of time 2 years ago. Travelers are now looking for trips 1 to 3 months in advance, an increase of 75% search growth over the year 2020, and those who are looking to travel to Puerto Rico are mostly in the US mainland. The report underscores the resilience of the industry and reveals how travel companies adapt to achieve a competitive advantage in the rapidly evolving environment. Travel is about to experience a year unlike ever before as people plan purpose-driven trips, value vacation time more, and up the investment of unique experiences. The new world of work will alter traveler priorities as companies prepare to return to the office and involve remote work policies. Employees are looking to make greater use of their vacation time. In some cases, combine work and play. More than half, 56% of those who work often remotely will take a resort-style trip, extending a work trip for leisure or vice versa, the report showed. Another conclusion is that investment in travel will boom compared to pre-pandemic activity. More than half, 54% of respondents said that they plan to spend more time on trips they did prior to the pandemic. 2 in 5 plan to use loyalty points for the latest part of the trip 2022, with Gen Z in the lead. Another news is that Honeywell Aerospace moved America Market HQ to Guaynabo. Some 14 after setting of operation in Puerto Rico, Honeywell Aerospace announced that will establish American market aftermarket headquarters in Guaynabo facilities, this location will serve airlines and businesses aviation customers throughout the Americas. During this news conference at La Fortaleza, Honeywell Aerospace CEO Mike Madsen said this move will help us to develop Honeywell local talent. Over the year, we have brought hundreds of interns from all over Puerto Rico, and I'm proud to say that more than 70% have become full-time employees. It is our priority to continue working with local universities, industry groups to move the local aerospace sector forward, which in real estate will help us in the area of Guaynabo. New people will move to Puerto Rico. They're looking forward to hire another 100 people that will need homes. Honeywell began operating in Puerto Rico in 2007 with 12 employees and now has 1,000 island-wide. In another news, Puerto Rico and the world economy outlook be shaped by uncertainty in 2022. 2 years after the COVID-19 virus acquired pandemic status, wreaking havoc throughout world economies, the relief vaccine should have proven seem to have fallen short as the virus, the Delta and Omicron variants continue to spread. The world feels no more vulnerable than ever. According to Sergio Marchuet, policy directors of the Center of the New Economy, the situation in Puerto Rico is exactly the same as anywhere else in the world. Nevertheless, for Maxwell's Puerto Rico economy outlook for 2022 does not seem as bleak as the Intentional Monetary Fund analysts see the world future this year. As 2022 begins, there is reason to believe that while we may need to keep adapting to new realities, the new world may also bring some positive developments for Puerto Rico. CNE Policy Director identified 6 specific situations which could help favorably for Puerto Rico economy in 2022, despite their more than probably negative outcome. March considered the pandemic, the debt restructuring after Hurricane Maria, inflation, the US midterm elections, and the return of geopolitics, the issue that must be kept on the radar for the possible positive or negative outcome. Regarding the debt restructuring plan approved by federal Judge Laura Taylor Swain 2 weeks ago, Marshworth admitted the plan is not perfect and it has been submitted of significant criticism. And it will be a really difficult task to determine with any certainty whether the plan is adequate. But it does offer some debt relief and lift the bankruptcy cloud from Puerto Rico, which should be a net positive for people looking at potential investment in Puerto Rico, he argues. Marshworth also put a positive sign on the possibility of the federal government finally approving projects and releasing relief funds for reconstruction after Maria. Still, he recognized that the difficulty now laying ahead are more political in nature, in terms of how the reconstruction should play out. Puerto Rico in the worldwide arena. In an update of the World Economy Outlook, the International Monetary Fund concludes the resurgence of the COVID-19 virus and its variants have provoked renewed mobility restriction, which in turn have case supply chain disruption and higher inflation rates, particularly in the US and many emerging markets in the developing economy. According to the IMF, inflation throughout the world is expecting to remain high, average 3.9% in advanced economy and 5.9% in developing economy during 2022. The risk is that persistent high living costs and tighter labor markets may force workers to put for higher wages and employees complying with such demand. The resulting higher labor costs would be pushed up prices further, perpetuating an inflation cycle. While this situation affects most countries, including Puerto Rico, in particularly silence in the US, where labor markets shortage seems to have fallen, and labor costs have risen. Still, high inflation is expecting to persist longer than anticipated by IMF and analysts. With ongoing supply chain disruptions and high energy prices throughout most of 2022, those highlighting the level of uncertainty. But the expectation is that the price will increase at the more moderate pace of 4.5% in 2022 before starting to decline in 2023. That'll be all. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. Well, some good news, some exciting news, some startling news. So the next part of the night is where we do the forced networking. If you haven't done this before, you're in for a treat because a lot of people really like this. What we're going to do is we're going to break up into groups and share, and then we're going to come back together. So can I ask you a favor in advance? Once you've met with this group and I call times up in 15 minutes, can we all agree to come back to our seats and continue with the program? Okay? I know it's hard when you've just met people and you're connecting and you want to keep going, but save that for afterwards. There's still pizza and things we can do after it's over. So we're going to break up into groups. It's going to be based on the color of your name tag. And I put little signs around. So there's purple over here, blue over there. So what you're going to do is you're going to go into groups with the color of your name tag. You're going to say your name, where you're from, what sort of real estate you're doing. And what I'd like to share this time is what it is that motivates you when maybe you come to an instruction. You're maybe down about something. What gets you back up? What
There, that's my contribution.
All right, guys, we're going to start the highlight of this evening. So I want to talk for a minute about John Hyre. John Hyre is actually my tax attorney. And I decided a year ago, I think, or a couple months ago, when I was at one of his many seminars, to go back and see when the name John Hyre first appeared in my emails. And it was 2005. So I started hearing about tax seminars and such all the way back in 2005. And through the mid-teens, I started going to these events in Las Vegas that have a few different speakers. And of course, it was always a highlight to listen to John. And then in 2019, I actually hired him, really needed him. And so in 2020, I came to Puerto Rico for a class with John. I'd actually decided I was gonna leave California. I'd had enough during COVID, and I knew I was gonna go somewhere, but I didn't know where. And I came to Puerto Rico to go to this class, and I was in Old San Juan, and actually on the second to the last day before I was leaving Puerto Rico, I met Jack Krupe and Nate Wiggum, and I started realizing that there were some really smart people in Puerto Rico, and that is actually one of the things I love about Puerto Rico is the people. There are great people here, and then there's great people who moved here, and they have kind of there's kind of vetting that goes on. To get to Puerto Rico, you probably had to have some success in your life already. I'd made a list of what I wanted in my life, and I looked at that list on that last night in Old San Juan, and Puerto Rico hit almost everything that was on my list. So I went into John the next day, and I said, John, how do I escape California? And we came up with a plan, and then I executed that plan. 3 months later, I was here in Puerto Rico. So John is actually part of the reason that I decided to move to Puerto Rico. So he is a tax attorney. He's been a tax attorney for 22 years. He's also a CPA. He helps do some really creative things with asset protection, with 401ks, IRAs, and he lives here in Puerto Rico. So please welcome John Hyre.
Alrighty, so I'm not allowed to pace like I normally do. A few things, brief introduction. I'll do English. Most Puerto Ricans speak better English than I do Spanish, pero si por si acaso alguien no habla el inglés tan bueno como habla español, hablan lento, no hablan como los puertorriqueños que tienen esta velocidad como metralladora en cocaína. Lentito, lento para el gringuito, ¿no? But, so I moved here about 3 years ago. I've been a tax attorney for about 27 years. Been out on my own for 20 of that, and my focus has been real estate, a lot of high-end people, and self-directed retirement accounts. So that's been the focus, but I do a lot of things in general. I don't know everything. I know a lot, but I don't know everything because tax has gotten to be like medicine. It's super specialized, and if you confuse the heart surgeon with the brain surgeon, you die. So I have very specific areas of expertise. I work from here. It's all Act 20. It's all virtual. I know a good bit about U.S. tax law. Now, Puerto Rican tax law, I know a little bit about Act 20 and 22 and 60, and that's it. And I talked to Giovanni about all the stuff I don't know, which is a really big category. I also do a lot of asset protection work for clients in the States. So it depends on how much activity you've got in the States, how useful I can be to you. For example, if you're solely in Puerto Rico, I'm useless to you. I mean, I might buy you a drink or be mildly amusing, unless of course you're LDS, in which case I can't even buy you a drink, but you drive. So there's that. I didn't come with a set agenda, so no PowerPoints. Now, can I talk without prompting? Oh, hell yes, that's what I do for a living. But I thought we'd open it up. What do you want to talk about? In particular, those of you that still have a presence back in the States. What do you do? What's your planning? What are your questions? I do an awful lot with self-directed retirement accounts. That's really gotten to be a focus. I started in real estate. I still do a lot of that. But I got an audit by accident. A client came in and said, my Roth IRA is being audited. I can't find anyone that knows what they're doing. And so I need you to help. And I said, well, I don't know what I'm doing either. I mean, he says, yeah, but you at least understand how they function. I'm like, yeah. And he says, and you're honest enough to admit what you don't know. Okay, that's fair. Well, the audit went really well. I grossly undercharged him. We went through the audit and to tax court, and the IRS gave up the day of the trial. So we showed up for calendar call. The tax court's like a circuit. The judge goes from city to city, and they're usually there for 1 to 2 weeks. And so everybody comes and stands in front of the judge and talks about the status of their case. Now, a secret of tax court, one reason I love it, 95% of cases that go to tax court settle, almost always in the taxpayer's favor. So your job is not to outrun the bear, it's to outrun one hiker out of 20. That's it, that's all you gotta do. You have to have not a totally crap case. Now, I have taken and told some people, your case is really bad. You should not pay me to go to tax court. A few of them did, and we got them settlements much better than what they deserve. A lot of my thinking in terms of when we do planning, aside from the normal set of rules, Circular 230, which governs what the tax professionals are allowed to do, is how's it going to go in tax court? How do I convince the lawyer, the IRS lawyer, that you're one of the 19 and not the one of the 20 that he's going to take to court and litigate? And so far, it's frustrating actually, career-wise. I would love to litigate a tax court case to its very end, and they keep settling with my clients and giving them such a good deal that I can never litigate. It's extremely upsetting professionally, but it seems to go well for the clients. So that first one I took to tax court for IRAs, I charged him less than $5,000 and saved him $150. He was pretty happy. In fact, the trial was the day of his birthday. So he was a pretty happy camper. The IRS bluffed right up until the day of the trial. And then at calendar call, they said to the judge, we need to talk for a second, and they just conceded the case and walked off. And it's like, well, why did you make us wait? Well, we're the government, that's what we do. Puerto Ricans really understand that. Like I've learned dealing with Puerto Rican bureaucracy and trámites, that it makes California look like a bunch of libertarians. So it's just part of the fun. You take the good with the bad. Jerry, what's up?
When you're ready, I have a question.
Oh, anytime, you gotta interrupt.
Oh, okay.
That's how this works.
So John, I have a lake house that I own on the mainland. I don't rent it out. It's our family house. We want to go. I'm at 60. We want to go for 4 months out of the year. I'm worried about time off the island, time on the mainland. If I get audited, they're going to say, okay, well, we want to tax your income on the mainland these 4 months. How do I understand this?
Let me repeat the question then for the camera. Someone in the audience, who shall be unnamed, hypothetically has a lake house in the States and has not done in the past, but has contemplated staying there for 4 months of the year in the future. What are the potential problems? It depends on why you're here. I'll give you an example. For me, that's a problem. Why? I provide services. So I do 2 things. I provide services and I sell info product. For the services are deemed provided wherever you're located. So for example, when I go to the States, I don't bill unless I have to. And by the way, when I do, I run it through a rollover business startup, a ROBS. So I do track my billing to the minute. If I'm on an airplane, when that puppy's outside of Puerto Rican airspace, I change the clock over and I bill to a different company. You got to segregate that stuff. So if it's services, that's a problem. Now, in terms of information content, I suspect there's not a lot of law on it. Now, if you're actually presenting, for example, podcasts physically from the States, you got a US presence, you're reporting US income. That's not going to be covered by Puerto Rican rates. So if you're going to do that, first you have to decide now, how do you bifurcate that? Because there's no set methodology, there's no case law of which I'm aware. You could ask Giovanni, who's the man on this stuff. That's one of the things that makes Giovanni unique. There are a lot of people here selling Act 20, 22, 60 setups. Okay, about half of them aren't even good at that. It's just, they template, and that's lawyers everywhere. I'm not just picking on Puerto Rican lawyers, because people are like, you're really hard on Puerto Ricans, and I'm like, have you heard me talk about gringos? I'm hard on everybody. I don't like people. So, one of the things about Gio, what does he have? First of all, he's very thoughtful on the decrees. Some of the stuff he put in my decree, he actually sat and thought about it. He was worth every nickel I paid him. Second, he understands these rules, actually better than I do. In terms of the information marketing, it depends on what you're doing. For example, I track my research time. I track my actual presentation time. I think the presentation time, when you're making the product or actually podcasting, is pretty cut and dry. Wherever you do that, that's where that income's going to go. But you can argue the prep was in Puerto Rico or the prep was in the States. as long as you have a methodology and you're consistent with it, that's the way to go. I'm about to run into that issue. This is the first year that I'll be outside of, in the 3 years I've been in Puerto Rico, I've been out maybe a month a year tops. Because for us, so the ACTS brought me here, La Escuela de Arte Plástica brought my wife here. So opposites attract. I'm a tax lawyer, she's an artist, and that works. Aside from her chaos. Because if you want to meet a swirling vortex of chaos, a Latin female artist is pretty much going to check every freaking box under chaos squared. Oh God, this is on camera. I love you, dear. I didn't really say that. No, because she's Chilena, and that's almost as bad as Boricua in terms of what happens to you if. So you're going to have to, I would talk to Gio about, especially in terms of the product content type stuff, how does that get divvied up? And it might be worth it. The way I do it is through a ROBS. And for style of life, as my kids get older, we don't have grandkids yet. Actually, we're getting ready to draw the eldest one pictures of how the things work. So we're traveling more. So I use the ROBS. So I use basically a C Corp owned by a Roth 401k. For a business like ours, that's not really capital intensive, you could probably get away with starting it for about 50 grand. You could get a ROBS that is dual, both Puerto Rico and mainland. That gets expensive. There's only one guy I know of who does that. But the nice thing is this, what happens? I work for the C Corp that's owned by the 401k. I generate whatever money I generate in the States. I pay myself a small salary and I contribute almost all of it to the 401k. And that does have an impact in Puerto Rico, right? The US taxes the salary at its rate. The Puerto Rican rate on regular salary is going to be higher. You guys pay stupid taxes on income. Right, your tax system here is screwed up. I'm sure you know this. You don't have property tax in any effective sense. So a big chunk of your tax base is missing. You don't have a distributed tax base. So what happens? Your 33% bracket starts at $60,000 married filing joint. Well, in the States, it starts at about $350 married filing joint. So you're in a high tax bracket here for regular money really quickly. What happens? It drives talent away. Puerto Rico doesn't have a problem producing talent. Puerto Rico has a problem keeping talent in Puerto Rico. It all goes to Florida or New York. So you're going to have that issue. The salary would be taxed at the US rate, and then that's going to be lower than the Puerto Rican rate, so the Puerto Ricans are going to pick up the difference. You usually keep the salary pretty low, and then you decide on the balance. All right, in order to be at this vacation house, how much am I willing to pay at the 21% corporate rate? Assuming the vacation house is maybe like Utah or somewhere with low or no income tax. Now, if it's in New York, or California, yeah, so choose carefully where that vacation house might be. Those are the basic considerations. And I only know it from dealing with it personally. You really want to talk to Gio or someone like him about how to allocate the income. For services, it's easy, but for content, that's a harder allocation to make. But this principle applies to everything. When you're looking about spending time outside of Puerto Rico, like for example, let's say all your income comes from capital gains. That's less of a problem. If you're under Act 22, most of your income is cap gains. Let's say you're a trader or some such. That's probably less of an issue unless what? You do a lot of trading overseas, and now somebody has an argument that it's in their jurisdiction. So those sourcing rules can get really complicated. Good question. Hypothetical question about potential future planning by an anonymous person. Other questions?
On the same issue, how would the bona fide Puerto Rican resident clause affect that?
Well, all right, so that's a good question. The question was how would the bona fide residency laws? Now, first of all, I'm looking at it from the US standpoint. Puerto Rico is going to take a similar approach. It's not quite the same though. I mean, they're both the US and Puerto Rico are going to look at, are you a bona fide resident? Now here's what happens on the websites. Everybody counts the days. And the people who really get on my nerves are like, well, how can we just spend 90 days in Puerto Rico? Well, here's how you can do that. Don't come. No, I find that irritating. So, assuming source of income is not a problem, you've got 3 sets of rules to deal with. Your tax home rule, which is typically where your residence is. And some places, some states look really hard. Like, where's the dog? Where are the kids? You know, where's the nice house? Oh, I bought a tent in Puerto Rico and a mansion in Florida, and I'm 6 months in each. I wonder which one's really your tax home. But most of the time it's pretty cut and dry. Where's your residence? If there's a tie on residences, then it's where's your office and your main place of business. The third one's the one that gets people, the closer connection test. This is the one that people ignore all the time. It's a subjective test. They give a list of factors. You know, some of them are simple. Where do you vote? Where's your driver's license? But what they're really going to look at, where do you live? Where are your connections? Again, that's where they look at. Where's your dog? Where do your kids go to school? Things, subtle things like that. And people think they can BS it. That, well, on paper, I live in Puerto Rico. Well, no, neither the IRS nor the Puerto Ricans, Hacienda. They look at substance over form. They're going to look at the reality. So that's subjective. So if you've got only 4 months over there, I'm pretty comfortable, especially if when you're here, the kids are with you, the wife's with you, etc., the primary office is here. Yeah, I'm pretty chill with that. It's when people get cute, you know, I stayed 184 days. What, do you want a cookie? That doesn't sound smart. Oh, and I put it all over the internet websites that the IRS views. Great, here's my number, call me. Hope it answered the question some. That last test is the doozy. It's subjective. And it's one of those ones, it's kind of like when they asked the Supreme Court Justice, I think it was Justice White, they asked him, when they have these cases for free speech, how do you tell if something is art or pornography? And he's kind of like, you know when you see it. You know, real similar concept here. So even though I told you guys I know nothing about really Act 20 or 22 or 60, that seems to be the direction of the questions, I'll answer to the best of my knowledge. If you rely on my advice, because it's not advice, it's actually just me talking educationally, you're going to win a financial Darwin Award. Make sure to talk to Gio or one of those guys that really knows what they're doing on that, because Gio knows both sides. I know enough to deal with my personal situation, and it's not the same as yours. What else you got? Or are you guys going to be easy and we'll just start telling dirty jokes and talking politics? Because that's the problem. You know, they're like, you shouldn't talk sex, politics, or religion. And that's seriously, I'm dead serious. That's the stuff you should talk about and know how to talk about. People.
Act 74, or now it's Tourism Act. Do you know much about that?
I know nothing about Act 74. I'm getting ready to invest with Catherine in a project she's working on. So I may be learning about how some of that works. So, nope, didn't pay any attention to it. Like I said, guys, I'm really good at stateside taxes. And Puerto Rico, I might know a tiny bit more than some of you. And that's only because I'm a tax lawyer. And so there's some concepts that translate. Other thoughts, concerns, dirty jokes. Catherine, and then back over here.
So I have a question about 401k or IRA money. If you have invested in some sort of syndication with your self-directed, and I know there might be a difference between 401k and IRA, so you might have to diverge and explain. But let's say it's one of those two vehicles. You've invested in some project of some size, and you're one really tiny man is fine. And later, after the project is moving forward, maybe it's 2 years in, maybe it's 5 years in, the syndicators of that project go and get leverage. Okay, maybe you don't even know they did it, but how do you deal with that? Because there's UBIT, right? So,
Okay, we got a little bit to unpack here. Let me rewind just a second. First of all, Puerto Rican IRAs cannot be self-directed. That is not permissible here, which is why everybody invested with government, you know, in UBS and government bonds and lost a crap ton of money. So it would be better if they would allow self-directed IRAs here. You could technically write a 401k plan in Puerto Rico for it to be self-directed, meaning you could invest in syndications or in rentals or flips or whatnot. I suggest you all get together and have someone do a master plan doc that everyone can use, because that is not cheap. But technically, you could set up a 401k in Puerto Rico that could be self-directed. Now, the way I do it, that seems like a lot of brain damage. And so my work in the States has an upside. When I work in the States, and by the way, it's always a C Corp. Remember, the Rob's rollover business startup structure, and it pays me a salary. It has a 401k. I contribute to it. It is self-directed. Likewise, I can contribute to an IRA in the States. So I use the US rules, which are much more liberal in terms of self-directing than the Puerto Rican rules, which require you entirely with IRAs and mostly with 401ks to invest in standard things. Now, what you got to be careful about, Puerto Rico's position, they've never really enforced it, A lot of things in Puerto Rico haven't been enforced. So Puerto Rico says it's okay to laugh, because I'm going to make fun of everybody else too. The official position Puerto Rico takes is that your U.S. IRA and your U.S. 401k are just ordinary trusts. They have no tax exemption, and they can tax the income from your 401k or IRA just like they would from a normal grantor trust, a living trust. Now, I haven't seen it enforced, and I have seen some accountants who, let's just say, don't necessarily report that way. It took us a long time to figure out that that was technically the law, because it's not enforced. But you have to be aware that it's out there. So what's the safest thing if you have a U.S. 401k or IRA? If you're Act 22 or the Act 60 equivalent, you invest the U.S. IRA or 401k in things that would be covered by Act 22 or the equivalent of Act 60. So for example, it lends out money. And there are details, but by and large, if it lends out money, the IRA or the 401k, interest is exempt under Act 22. So Puerto Rico's not going to go after it. Now, someone else might, depending on where you're lending and how you do that. So again, there are subtleties here that you have to be aware of. So let me start with that. Now, let's assume that's not an issue. You have a U.S. 401k or IRA. Her question was, if you invest in a syndication, so let's ask some questions. The syndication sounds to me like a build, and is it going to be a build and rent or a build and do something else?
Acquisition and rental.
Okay, so the classic syndication of you get in there, you're a very small player in the entire syndication, right? Maybe it's, I don't know, a $50 million raise and you put in 100 grand or something. So you're a little player in there. Anything that the syndication does, your IRA or 401k is deemed to have done. It's like the opposite of the Las Vegas rule. What happens in the syndication does not stay in the syndication. It's as if your IRA or 401k did it directly. Well, IRAs and 401ks are normally tax exempt, except when they're not. There's a rule called UBIT, a tax, unrelated business income tax, UBIT. There are three things that trigger it. So if your IRA or 401k does any of these three things, it's taxable and potentially at really high rates. UBIT quickly gets to a 37% bracket. If you're in California, throw another 13% on it. Welcome to 50% land, which is not what most people had in mind for their supposedly tax-exempt account. So you got to pay attention to these rules. The three things that make an IRA or 401k taxable, in other words, UBIT applies. It rents out personal property. So either the IRA directly or a syndication it invests in rents out personal property. Furniture, generators, automobiles, meth labs, whatever. Not usually a problem. The second one is a big problem. You invest in an ongoing or continuous trade or business, and that is a term of art. The IRA or the 401k, either directly or through a syndication, invests in an ongoing trade or business. And it's usually one of those things you kind of know it when you got it. A law practice, a Dairy Queen, a hardware store, those are all trades or businesses. Flipping houses, if you flip enough of them, it's a trade or business. Developing a big project, not for rent, but to sell it. I'm going to develop this project, but it's a huge project. And you're like, well, it's only one project. We don't have a pattern. Size matters. Size matters sometimes. And so if you have one huge project you invest in that it's build and sell, that's probably enough that the IRS would consider it an ongoing trade or business, which means that the 401k or the IRA would pay this UBIT tax. So be aware of that. And there are ways to reduce it, right? I'm touching the very edges. So if there is UBIT tax, there are sometimes ways that we can plan around it or at least take some of the bite out of it. The third way is to borrow. If your IRA or 401k borrows, to the extent you borrow, for example, let's say 70% of your capital is debt, 30% is equity. 70% of the income produced would be UBIT taxable. So, and this is the case now where we're getting into these kind of real estate construction deals. You get into a construction deal, they're going to rent, so it's not an ongoing trade or business. They're not selling it, or if they sell it, it's going to be years later after they've rented it for a long time. So you invest in this syndication, and the syndication borrows. Well, that borrowing is attributed to your IRA, because unless the syndication is a C corporation, so I'm adding now a wrinkle, unless the syndication is a C corporation, What happens in the syndication happens in the IRA. Now, C corporations are like Vegas. If the syndication is a C corporation, what happens in the C corporation stays in the C corporation. It pays its own separate tax rate. And so we oftentimes will set up an intervening C corporation. Let's say my IRA buys a Dairy Queen and I don't want to pay 37% tax. What do? I form a C corporation. The IRA uses that to buy the Dairy Queen and pays 21% corporate tax instead of 37% UBIT. That's called a blocker. It's called a blocker corporation. Why? Because what happens in the C Corp, like Vegas, stays in the C Corp. Now, in the case of rental syndications, they're almost always pass-throughs. So if it borrows, your IRA would have UBIT exposure. Your 401k probably does not. 401ks have several special features that I think make them superior to IRAs. Here's a big one. IRAs and 401ks follow the same UBIT rules. So those 3 rules I gave you, it's the same for both types of account, with one really big exception. If a 401k is subject to UBIT solely because it borrowed to acquire or improve real estate, if the 401k is subject to UBIT solely for no other reason other than it borrowed directly through the 401k or indirectly through the syndication to acquire or improve real estate, no UBIT. Why? Because Congress said so. They're not consistent. So a lot to unpack there. That is non-trivial. Like that, if you remember during the seminar, we actually took about an hour to discuss that. So for you guys, it was fast forward. Hopefully you'll get it. If not, it's recorded. Hopefully it'll make sense the 50th time you listen to it. But bottom line is 401ks have a huge advantage when investing in leveraged real estate when compared to any other retirement account.
A couple consulting questions. So if you consult on a real estate deal in the States, how would you see that as far as your Puerto Rico taxes? Like if you get paid for consulting, property's in someone else's name, but you're consulting on that deal.
Okay, let me repeat the question and then I'm going to ask for clarification because you used a word that makes me do one of these.
Right.
You are paid to consult with regard to a property in the States. All right, anytime I hear consulting or management fees, right away I'm like, what BS are you trying to hide? What are you doing? What's going on? And the IRS has a similar reaction. Consulting, what's that mean? So within reason, right? For example, you have rentals in the States, hypothetically, you manage them from here. Could you charge the company in the States a management fee, lower its income, the management fee is picked up here under Act 20, you pay your, they say 4% rate, but when you throw in all the little extras, I find it to be closer to 6 to 7% unless you're making a whole ton of money, because stuff like salary and so on gets picked up at a higher rate. But bottom line is, you're arbitraging. I'm trying to suck income out of the operation, in this case by managing. I'm using a more specific term on purpose. I'm managing. Why? Because there are customary management rates. What's your management fee? 50% of the gross rent? Good luck. Right? Good luck. Well, actually, it's an Airbnb. Ah, okay. Why? Because in the Airbnb business, 40 to 50% management fees are common. You can get away with what happens in the market. But on a normal rental, what's a normal management fee? Probably closer to 10%. This is referred to as transfer pricing. It's a big issue when you're charging for services. You have a US operation, you're charging it for services, how much can you get away with? And that's a transfer pricing study if you really need to get into it. And that's not a bad thing to do. For those of you that deal with real estate in the US, every couple of years, you get an appraisal on the property to tell the property tax people, hey, right? Same thing, you might do a transfer pricing study every once in a while. So if it's something you're willing to discuss, and if you're not, I understand, what kind of consulting are we talking about? For whom and how much? And how is the price determined and how does it compare to the market?
So maybe it's not consulting. So what it is it's a property that my father owns. I'm funding everything. So it's a major remodel. I'm funding everything. I'm overseeing all the work. I mean, all from here. I live here permanently. So I'm overseeing everything from here, though. So when he sells the property, I'm the one that did all the work and I mean, like I said, funding everything. So I'll first, of course, have to get the money back that I put into his property.
Is the property, so let's ask a few questions. Has the property ever been rented?
No, it's still under remodel.
Is it going to be rented or is it going to be immediately sold once it's done? Is it just a flip?
It'll be sold pretty quickly.
Okay, so it's a flip. So first you have to bifurcate the funding and the work. The work, I would structure it as some sort of, again, figure out what people get away with in the industry. Here's a very common arrangement on a deal where one property, especially if it's single family, but even if it's larger, it's very common in the real estate industry that the guy with the money gets half and the guy that does the work gets half. So, because I'm always going to go back to the market and think about what will the market permit. So right away, what am I going to do? I'm going to structure my compensation in Puerto Rico for having done all the work from Puerto Rico at 50% of the profit. That's a very common thing. I think you can support it. I think that'll pass muster on an audit. Then if you're putting in money, you got to think about how you're going to structure that so that you're probably going to get hit some in the States, right? It depends, again, I'm just thinking out loud now because I haven't thought of this particular question. I'm trying to think about how to structure the money side. You might get away with doing a loan. Yeah, and Gio's really good at this. For some purposes, bona fide residents of Puerto Rico are foreigners, and for some purposes, they're not. When you are lending into the US, you want to be a foreigner because there's something called portfolio interest. Portfolio interest, that's a really important term. If you're lending into the US, properly structured, I think Gio usually uses a corporation out of Puerto Rico or a corporation out of one of the Caribbean islands. That's considered portfolio interest. The US won't tax it, which is important because the source of interest is where the payor is at. So if you're making a loan to someone in the States, the payor is in the States will tax you unless what? It's portfolio interest. And then Puerto Rico won't hit you on it because of Act 22. So that might be one way to do it. That might be one way to do it. If it's considered short-term capital gains in the US, it might be, if you don't have a pattern of flipping there, you might get away with, there's this concept of being a dealer. If you buy and sell enough properties in the States, it's usually bad. Basically, you're taxed as if it were a W-2, which is the worst possible way to be taxed. If you only sell a few here and again, and that number is really indeterminate, it's one of those other ones I kind of have to see it, you can argue it's short-term capital gains. What's the problem? The sale of the property is always situs to where the property sits. So if you're going to get capital gains or ordinary income, depending on how it's going to get taxed, that will be hit in the States.
So he owns it though.
He owns it, but you put money in, right?
Yeah. So I'm
He owns, but you're funding it, but he owns it. So if you fund it, because the IRS looks at reality. You could put your dad's name on the deed, and the IRS could say, you put all the money, who gets this? Does your dad get any of the profit?
He could.
Now we're talking. Now we have attorney-client negotiation. I'm very familiar with how this goes. Remember, they look through to the substance. So if you fund it and all the money finds its way to you, you own it. And you're like, no, dad's on the deed. And the IRS is like, that don't confront me none. They look at the reality. So now you got to think about, and that's where with a client, now I start getting into, how much do you love your dad? Does your dad need help? Do you help your dad? Or is your dad doing pretty good and he's just kind of doing you a favor? If it's you're getting all the money, I would be tempted to structure it as a loan. Or just eat the cap gain. I mean, it depends on other factors. Now I have to start looking at the returns and such. Like, do you have anything in the States? Can you generate losses? Do you have unused standard deductions, et cetera? How much gain are we going to have? So it starts to get detailed. And remember, I'm also dealing in an area where I'm not the expert. I know a lot, but in terms of the international law, which is what we're really dealing with, where is the income sightest? That's where you get the specialists involved. The same way that when most lawyers and accountants hear about self-directed IRAs and they go fetal and suck their thumb under the desk for 20 minutes and then call me, that's how I react to international taxation normally. But Catherine put a podium that I can't hide behind. So those are some thoughts. There are some thoughts. I think they merit further development. Lamentably, I'm not the guy to develop them. Man's got to know his limitations.
So, this is a different question, but similar. What if you're looking to get dual citizenship in another Caribbean island, say Jamaica, and you're Act 60 and part of all the incentive program? How does the IRS look to that? Are you red flag now? Because now you can do business with all the other Caribbean islands?
Okay, so if you were to hypothetically get dual citizenship, for example, with Jamaica,
Yeah.
how does that, the IRS doesn't care. You're still a U.S. citizen, so the IRS doesn't change its treatment of you at all. Now, whether or not the State Department or all the other people who, are trying to keep us behind, I mean, we're building a wall in the States, a Berlin Wall, but instead of concrete, it's made out of paper. And it's not, they don't really care about keeping you here, they just want to make sure your money stays. So there could be some issues there. Sometimes the U.S. is a very jealous girlfriend in terms of dual citizenship. But tax-wise, I don't think it would make any difference. What you would look at, where are you doing business? Do they have a tax treaty with the U.S. and or Puerto Rico? And how does, now you want to get complex with international law? Start bringing up tax treaties, because that then bends everything a little bit. So I can tell you a few things to look for, but again, international tax law, for me to actually give you advice, which I'm not, would be instant malpractice. Instant. So I know what I don't know. I'm very narrow. That's the way of the world nowadays. We're becoming more like the insects that Robert Heinlein despised.
So who would we talk to about that?
I'm sorry?
Who would we talk to about that type of
Gio, if you can get him.
Gio.
He's hard because he's good. No, he's good. That's why. I mean, I got the same issue. I dropped now my billable hours to 3 a day. I raised my rate to $700 an hour, thinking that would drive people away. No. So now I'm gonna have to raise it again, so that I only want to bill 3 hours a day. The rest of it is content creation and hanging out with all these various, the social life, as Catherine was saying, in Puerto Rico. 2 things I really love about coming here that were massive bonuses. We live in a building that's mostly Boricuas, which has been great for me. I mean, first they get to make fun of my accent, which is really amusing. Okay, so for the Puerto Ricans, in my wife's Spanish, I learned Spanish from my mom and my wife. I had 2 Latinas bossing me around in 2 different dialects. Never went to school or studied it. I studied German. And so in my wife's dialect, she's from Chile, and they have a very interesting dialect. The word bicho means insect. Don't ever tell a Puerto Rican that you were bitten by a bicho. Because in Puerto Rican Spanish, a bicho is not an insect. It's something that's attached to men. And so my Boricua friends have a ball with that. They're like, was it large or small? How many times did it bite you? So they had a ball with it. But we love the social life here. And then the Act 20, 22, 60 crowd, a lot of really decent people, a lot of sharp people. And the other thing is just how chill things are. Because if you're not chill here, you will go nuts. Like if you come here type A, you either go home and stay type A, or you calm down, because you'll just go nuts. So that's been really cool. Not really relevant, but What else you got?
So you were saying that if you're trading and stuff in the States, like you leave Act 60, if you go to the States for a few months and you trade, saying it's not that big of an issue. But what if you're intraday scalping, you're taking like 50 trades a day, a couple hundred trades a week?
I don't know. So the question has to do, it's just because I'm not versed in that area. For example, I know the services part well because I perform services, so I need to know it well. Plus it's simple. Wherever the service is performed, that's where it goes. Trading, I'm just not quite sure how the nexus works. Is it because you're a bona fide resident of Puerto Rico, even though you execute a trade, the capital gains, assuming the trading is low enough volume that it's still capital gains and not something else under Puerto Rican law, as well as US law? So it gets complicated because they intertwine. Of how do they determine where the trade is sourced? I flat out don't know the answer. I know someone who does. I won't say names because of privacy, but I'll ask, if you leave a message with Catherine, she can get a hold of me. I'll ask him how he does it, and without revealing his name, because he's a real private guy. He's not gonna come out and tell anybody this or that. But I'll ask him how he does it, because I know sometimes he's in the States, and I'll ask him, A, how does he do it, which may or may not be right, and B, what does his accountant tell him to do? And what I've learned, even if your accountant tells you it's right, well, maybe, maybe not. So I don't have a good answer for you on that.
Thank you. So how is outsourcing handled here? So say you're outsourcing a service from, say, the Philippines, you have VAs who are doing a certain amount of work, and you're providing a service more of consulting. Is that, do you separate that? Because you're talking about you do a lot of services, right? So how do you manage that?
So the question is, if you're outsourcing, and it depends on how you're outsourcing. Here's the key difference, and it gets, again, because all tax law is super complicated. Because they can't do anything simple and lay clear rules, because then you would use them to your advantage. They have to keep it intentionally gray so they can tell you after you screwed up that you screwed up. The key is that whatever you outsource is not an employee, especially not in the States. And that has to do with how much control you have over them. There are a bunch of tests. It's not simple. But the main test is control. Here's the good news. Foreign VAs are almost never treated as employees. That's extraordinarily rare, especially not by the IRS. The IRS has no interest in that. There's no upside for them to treat a foreign VA as an employee. So with Philippine VAs, I wouldn't be worried at all. Now, if you've got a VA in the States, you better make damn sure they're an independent contractor and not just on paper, but in reality. And there are these complicated set of tests. Mostly, how much control do you have over them? How do they charge? I mean, if they charge by the hour, they work only for you, and you dictate their hours and what they do, you got an employee. Somebody who's just commissioned and works for other people and can kind of do it when they want, okay, that's probably a contractor. Where does it get tough? When it's somewhere in between. So I think the key is to make sure, if it's in the US, that VA is not an employee. Why? Because once you have an employee in the States, then the States says part of your business is the US. You have a place of business in the US, and now you got to argue over how much business is Puerto Rico and how much business is the US. And as you might imagine, the IRS is going to try and stick its thumb on that scale.
Right. So you're saying if they're employees in the States or Canada or whatever, because you have control over their time and what they do and everything, that gives you more autonomy or kind of control over that. Right?
So if they're employees anywhere, that place can theoretically say you have a business in that place. Now the Philippines never does that. The US sure as hell does. So you want whoever is doing your services for you, you want to make sure that they're contractors, especially if they're in the US. Now I don't know about the other countries, for example, I don't know how hardcore Canada is. I mean, until recently we thought they were easygoing, friendly people.
Right.
There's nothing like fascism with a smile. At least, be polite about it.
Yeah.
Would you like a donut with your fascism?
So if they're providing a service, that's not an employee clearly because they're providing service to everyone.
No, it's not so simple. If they're providing a service, again, it's how are they paid, how much control do you have, how many other people do they work for? And some things are traditionally contractors. For example, lawyers, accountants. That's understood, usually. Now, let's say you have an accountant that works just for you and all they do is your books, and you tell them when they get to do that. That's an employee. So, but in the middle, somewhere it gets gray.
So under Act 60, Chapter 3, which is expert service, that would be a problem because they're outside Puerto Rico.
Well, see, Puerto Rico, so the question was, would that be a problem under Act 60 for export services? I don't know how Puerto Rico looks at it. Here's my guess, because I've just never had to deal with the issue. Puerto Rico would probably look at it and go, are you paying us? Yeah. Okay. Now, if they wanted to be really difficult about a decree and say, well, we don't think you're exporting because these people are over there. I don't see them doing that. Generally not that level of sophistication, generally no incentive to do that, unless they're really, really, somebody at Hacienda gets a very anti-gringo burr up their butt, which they've had a little bit of that lately. But on really basic stuff, because the audits that are happening right now, very Latin. There's a hilarious video out of Spain on Latin bureaucracy that the Puerto Ricans inherited from the Spaniards and how intentionally difficult and impossible they are. But the way they do it, the way, for example, that the audits have been going, where people are losing their decrees, has been somebody didn't file a form. They're not digging that deep into the substance. Somebody didn't file a form. And you're like, well, I thought my accountant filed it. I paid him to file it. Well, then Hacienda says, we don't care. Did you file the form or didn't you? And then you go, well, that's not really fair. And they're like, we don't really care. Did you file the form or didn't you? And what's the problem? Unfortunately, I have to say there's a fair number of accountants that don't know what they're doing. And so you really need to know which forms need to be filed here, and you need to verifiably file them. Don't trust the accountant, hey, I filed it. No, you gotta follow up. Where's my receipt? If we send it in, for example, to San Juan municipality, if it went in by paper instead of electronic, I want certified mail. And if it went in electronic, I want proof that it went in, because that's what they're hitting people for. But that's pretty easy to, so here's the word, I've talked to several people who had their decrees revoked, and I've talked to some accountants and lawyers, and I'm starting to hear some of the buzz. It's all been, they look at your paperwork, and in particular, if you miss the EAR, the exempt annual report, that's fatal on its own. You're done.
What's it called?
EAR, exempt annual report. You need to file it, you need to be able to prove you filed it. But there are some other issues they're sensitive about. For example, the municipal side. Your office address is at your lawyer's place in San Juan, or at a place like this in San Juan, but you live and work in Guaynabo. Oh, that's going to be a problem. That's going to be a problem. Best make sure that wherever you actually work is the address registered with them. And yeah, they charge you $450 to change the address, which I had to do, and it was annoying, but I keep going, 4%, 4%, 4%. I'll pay the $450. The culture of bureaucracy in Latin America is very much, did you dot the I, did you cross the T, was a staple at exactly the right spot on the paper. It's just cultural. So be aware of that. In terms of them looking at what they don't want, the purpose of the act of exporting the service, they don't want you competing with locals on local business. If I provide legal advice to people in Puerto Rico, which would be instant malpractice, as you probably can tell by now, they don't want that. They want to bring people who are bringing in business from the outside. So that's largely how they look at it. So far, I have not heard of audits by the Puerto Rican authorities that are highly substantive. What do I mean by that? Did you file all the forms? Were the forms pretty much correct? They'll look at days. They'll look at presence. Where do you work from? What are you exporting? But if the general narrative sounds right, what I'm hearing is they don't really dig. They're really form-based. The IRS is much more likely to dig into, where's your dog live? Where do your kids live? Where do your kids go to school? Do you go to church? Which one? Where? To determine where do you really live. So there's a cultural difference in how they look at those things. Now, Puerto Rico has the capacity to do what the IRS does in theory. But in practice and culturally, that's just not how it typically functions. That's what I'm hearing so far. It's just people have called me to talk to me about, by the way, so far they've revoked about 300 decrees, and about 2/3 of them are people who left. But they have pressure from the press that, the colonizers are coming, so we got to show that, that's unacceptable, and we're tough. So they said they revoked all these decrees. Now, in the very fine print, when you talk to people, well, yeah, they revoked Bob's decree. Well, what happened? Well, Bob was here like 2 weeks. He didn't explore the island. He had no idea what he was getting into. He got here with his wife, and she went like this. And it's over. You're gone. You're done. We explored for 4 years before we came. We would come and live for a week in different parts of the island over the course of 4 years to make sure it was a good fit. So just a heads up on kind of what's happening out there. Be ready. I did an audit on my stuff. Guys, I'm a tax lawyer, and I still went and did an audit of all my filings, and there were a few that could not be proved, that now we're going and either going to el municipio and getting proof, or if they can't find it or won't give it, because that's not a trivial process, we're filing a new one as a protective filing, saying we think we filed the original, but we didn't have the return receipt. We're refiling to prove that we filed it. This is a duplicate of the original filing. I call it a protective filing. You better have every freaking piece of paper. Do a self-audit, and don't do it with the same accountant you got. And for those of you that are too cheap to do it, you're not saving enough money. I'm just saying, because if you're saving enough money, paying a little bit to have somebody double check, and you need to, I hate to say this for those of you that are not into this stuff, you need to have a list of every form, and there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them. And you got to do your own due diligence on that. It's just the truth. There is some correlation, it's not perfect, but there is some correlation with size and accreditation. Some of the smaller accountants with no accreditation here have had, let's just say, more problems in terms of negligence. It doesn't mean the big firms are all good, just a little bit better odds. So watch out for that. We were surprised. I was shocked that I missed paperwork. I was not amused. We fixed it because here's the word. If you fix it before the audit, you're good. Even if it's late, if there's a late fee, pay the late fee. Whatever the issue is, if you fix it before the audit, you're good. So don't fiddle around.
I'm a little slow.
But it's un loco.
I'm a little.
Oh, local.
So no, I'm 22.
I'm speaking difficult with you.
Well, because, like you mentioned, there's no self-directed IRAs. The closest thing I've been able to find is Keogh, which I don't know enough about to like.
Yeah, nobody uses those in the States anymore. I don't know anything about them because the last time people used those, I was chasing, well, unsuccessfully, chicks in high school. So I don't know if they allow you to self-direct a Keogh here. I'm very...
Well, you can.
Oh, yeah?
Apparently that's the only way that you can do any kind of.
Okay, you can self-direct it. Well, tell me when I'm learning. So you can self-direct a
I don't
Keogh.
know that much else.
Okay.
I know Charles Schwab does that kind of stuff.
Okay, let's be clear what I mean by self-directed and what Charles Schwab means by self-directed. Charles Schwab means you can buy any product we sell. I mean I can buy pretty much anything. Rental properties, Airbnbs, tech stock, animals. I've had people buy horses and cattle. I don't ask them what they do with them. Just like your IRA bought a horse or a cow. Have fun with that.
I still think you can do Keoghs without Charles Schwab here. But I guess in any case, my question was going to be, I also own property in DC. And my question was going to be more towards, does it make sense for me to try to invest in self-directed IRAs in the U.S. or?
Okay, so you own property in DC. Is it rental or Airbnb?
It's currently on Airbnb. It's on Airbnb.
It's a rent, just regular rental. Okay, so here's your issue. In order to contribute to an IRA or a 401k in the U.S., you have to generate, and there's a specific term, compensation. Rental income from a normal rental is not considered compensation.
It's an Airbnb.
Now, so here's the thing. Now, if it's an Airbnb, if the average rental period is 7 days or less, then that's considered compensation. It's normal Schedule C on your U.S. return, not Schedule E, but Schedule C, and you pay self-employment tax. To the extent that you show a net profit at the bottom line on that Schedule C, that number, that's one limit on how much you can contribute. You can set up a solo 401k, you can have an IRA, you can have both. That number at the bottom of Schedule C is your compensation, assuming that's your only source of comp in the U.S. So for example, if it's showing a loss because of depreciation, no comp, no contribution. On the other hand, if there's net profit, then yeah, you can contribute to a solo and or an IRA in the U.S. And the other way for an Airbnb to qualify is if you provide significant services. So, and you don't have to be the one directly doing it. Somebody's making the beds every day like a hotel. Somebody's cleaning the room every day like a hotel, not just when they leave. If you do significant services or the average rental period is 7 days or less, it's considered compensation. It qualifies for contribution to a 401k. Somebody finally asked me a question that I'm like, yes, this is my area.
So you mentioned earlier Airbnb management remotely and transfer pricing. Could you explain how if that would be relevant to me?
Oh, I mean, so it's a case of size matters. The question is with an Airbnb and transfer pricing, could he charge a management fee from Puerto Rico to manage his Airbnb and thereby pay the lower Puerto Rican Act 20 rate or the equivalent for Act 60 and lower the U.S. income? Sure, you got to figure out what can you get away with. And typically the commission, most of the, on Airbnbs, the commissions are typically 40 to 50%. So that's a good chunk of change. But the question becomes, does this Airbnb generate enough income that it's worth all the brain damage, setting up an Act 20 company, et cetera? Because here size matters. You have to be able to justify it. I saw a hand in the back. How are we doing on time, Catherine?
Should probably wrap it up in 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay, we got a wee bit more time. Oh, okay. Yeah, I appreciate when you hold your hand up if it's all 5 fingers and not just one. Thank you.
Okay. So you're asking me, I'm just being clear. Question for you is, I'm toying with living here. I have a place here. I'm here some of the time, not other times. I'm a real estate investor. I have significant carry forward depreciation losses, so I don't pay tax in the U.S. Should I be worried about staying under that, like 180-day limit, so that I don't establish residency?
It's hard to accidentally establish residency here. I guess if you live here more than 180 days a year, and it is you have your tax home here, and really it's the closer connection test. Like if you really spend a bunch of time here, you could accidentally become, I wonder, here's what I haven't looked at, it just never occurred to me. Do you have to file the form and declare yourself a bona fide resident? Or if you qualify, can the IRS on an audit say, oh, you're a bona fide resident, or can Puerto Rico say it?
Yeah, I'm more worried about Puerto Rico saying it, right? Like them saying, hey, because I pay zero tax. I paid zero tax.
Well, and if you pay zero tax in the States on, it's because of rental properties?
Yeah,
And is the carry forward a net operating loss, or is it a passive loss?
it's passive. That's the only thing I.
Yeah, so probably, here's my guess. I doubt Puerto Rico would figure it out. If they did, I doubt there would be income due, because their depreciation rules are different, but probably not so different. In other words, you would probably still be showing a loss on the US properties under Puerto Rican law, and therefore would not owe tax. It strikes me as extraordinarily unlikely that Puerto Rico, though, would, I've never heard of it. Again, I don't know Puerto Rican tax law.
Because I do get that real estate professional status, so some of it I do characterize it against my act.
Okay, now if you're a real estate professional,
Yeah,
that's a net operating loss.
So I misspoke there. So I worry about the other income that I'm using I'm offsetting.
Yeah, you're offsetting other types of income. Yeah, you got to ask a Puerto Rican tax guy on that. So would Puerto Rico say you're a bona fide resident and they're going to hit you?
I
think the odds are really freaking low.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, is it dirty joke time? Because I know it's taxes.
I got a left field question for you. The taxes paid in Puerto Rico are considered foreign tax credit in the United States?
I have no idea. Again, the taxes paid in Puerto Rico eligible for foreign tax credit. I would say probably, but I don't know that for a fact. You guys got to get Gio back up here, somebody that knows this stuff.
I saw him on Tuesday and he didn't seem to indicate that he wanted to come.
Yeah, well, that'd be cool. Because he's the one that knows this stuff.
Who is Gio?
Oh, Gio.
New guy.
You know, it's kind of like Satoshi. Yeah. So it's a Giovanni Mendez. He's my tax lawyer here. Very, very sharp guy, and a good guy on top of that. Let us say, euphemistically, since we're on camera, he is very familiar with his feces. Other questions? So it turns out not a lot of U.S. tax issues, a whole lot of Puerto Rican tax issues. Who knew?
So, just a personal question for you. You mentioned that you have to, it's expert services, so you can't advise us that are Puerto Ricans then?
I can do some of
this.
If I advise people who are resident here, then I have to report it separately and pay a separate tax on it, which I intensely dislike. Now, sometimes people have companies in the States that pay me, and if they're really clever, when they happen to be in the States, they might call me. But as long as I'm getting paid from a U.S. company, I don't sweat it too much, and it's very rare. It's pretty rare. I mean, because I'm cutting my hours down and raising my rates and selling a lot more content. So everybody knows content is way easier than actually doing things. So that's been my experience anyway.
So going back
so you live here, how do you contribute to your 401k in the US? So first of all, I'm a little bit conservative with 401ks. I do like to see a small contribution every year to keep it alive. I don't think it's strictly speaking mandatory. It's a little gray. I don't want to test it because the net present value of a Roth 401k, the amount you're saving, I'm very conservative about protecting that. So with a 401k in the States, I tell people, here's a great example that sort of kind of fits. Some people, I talk to them and they're like, wow, 401ks are so much better than IRAs. And I have this I had a client with $3 million in a traditional IRA that they wanted to put in a 401k. And they said, because I love the 401k, it's all these benefits, but I don't have a trader business. They worked in Silicon Valley. They only made like 500 grand a year, which over there is like you can barely live. And they were like, we work a hard job, we make a big wage, we don't have time for a business. And I'm like, sure you do. And he's like, what do you mean I have time for a business? And he was sitting there with his wife, and I said, do you have crap at home that you could sell on eBay to the tune of about $2 grand a year? And he's like, no. And she's like, yeah. And so then he goes, yeah, because that's how it works. And I said, that's a sales business. Sell $2 grand of crap, go buy stuff and resell it if you got a hobby, whatever you're good at, or sell stuff. Don't take a lot of deductions. I just want to see $2 grand on Schedule C. That's enough to set up a solo K, assuming you have no employees. Because a solo K is solo because no employees. If you have employees, 401ks get more complicated and expensive. Doesn't mean you can't do them. They just get more complicated and expensive. So that's one way to do it. Again, I have to look more at your business. What do you do? If you don't have Airbnbs in the States, how can you generate compensation when you're in the US? And to know the answer to that, I have to know more about you. How much time do you spend there? What do you do? So for me, it's easy because I speak there. Because sometimes there's still legacy people. There are a lot of people, clients, love to come here. But some of the West Coasters don't like to fly that far. So I'm doing one in Arizona in late July, and the California people will show up. And so for me, it's easy. So I'd have to ask questions. How long are you in the States? What do you do? And then we start asking questions. Well, what could you do there to generate just enough to suit your goal? And then we get into the goal. Now your goal might be, well, John, I want to max my US 401k out. Okay, well that means you're going to have about 60 to 70 grand a year of compensation because that's the max limit per year to a 401k. And by the way, you can have multiple 401ks if you structure it right. There are ways to do that. Has to do with ownership of companies, who owns it, who doesn't. So then we'd have to have a talk, well, what could you do while you're up there that would generate that kind of money? Now here's what I don't like. I have a company that pays me a salary. Okay, what do you do for that salary? Not much. See, because the IRS does look at the substance. They dig into that. So we would have to find a way to justify a good sized wage while you're up there, and then ask the question, is it worth taking the Puerto Rico hit? You generate the wage, you pay federal income tax, which is going to be lower than here typically, and state income tax, but maybe you try and generate it in a state with no income tax. Florida's close by, that's nice. But remember, that salary is not covered by your decree. And Puerto Rico sucks in that salary on your return, and let's say the Puerto Rican rate's 33% and your US rate was 20%, Puerto Rico says, we'll take the other 13%. So you gotta decide if it's worth it. You gotta decide how badly do you wanna stuff that 401k. I just like mine at maintenance level. I have enough in it in the States. I wanna work enough and pay the salary such that I can at least keep it at maintenance level, 2 or 3 grand a year. I'm not interested in putting that much more in it because of that cost, that price. I'm not willing to pay that. Unless I start coming up with Puerto Rican deductions, which we may be talking about that because Seth was explaining some things about that project to me. So I don't understand the Puerto Rican tax system. I know just enough to know what I'm supposed to do with my specific situation. So I'm learning. In fact, if you ever have a Puerto Rican CPA or lawyer, please invite me, because I'll be asking the same questions you guys are.
So if you do a buy-sell business with, I don't know, 5 grand of income in 2022, you pay yourself a salary out of that? It's a buy-sell business.
Well, it depends on how, it gets complicated. It depends on how it gets structured. My default structure for anything in the States is going to be a C corporation. That's not always optimal for other reasons. But the reason is, with a C Corp, anything it earns internally, Puerto Rico doesn't touch unless what? You pay a salary or you pay out dividends. So I don't pay out dividends, hell no. Unless what? You're Act 22, then maybe it's okay, maybe. Because there's an issue with citing dividends. The US may hit it. I pay myself enough salary to get me what I want. I'd probably structure it as a C Corp so that whatever income above my salary it makes, that extra income stays in the C Corp. Now, if I'm only going to make a little bit of income, just make sure you do it when you're up there. I wouldn't even have an LLC. For my eBay example, I make $2,000. It's just enough to maintain a 401k up there. And I can roll my traditional IRA into it and keep my 401k balance. And it's kind of a belt and suspenders, keep the 401k alive. Not strictly speaking, probably necessary, but a good conservative move. If that's all I want to do, I'm going to find a way to generate $2,000 of income up there through a sales business or a consulting business. I'm not even going to set up an LLC. It's not worth the hassle. I'm just going to put it on Schedule C, done. The only thing that would be separate would be the bank account. Oh God, somebody put on sunglasses. It's like the Blues Brothers now. It's like, whoa. What was it? We're on a mission from God? Of God.
Mission from God.
So, I need to drink. And I can tell the energy is slowing down. Taxes, on an island where there's a lot of fun things to do. So why don't we just call it a night? I hope you guys got something out of it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Taxes are part of the reason some of us are down here in Puerto Rico is taking advantage of certain tax laws and benefits that we are lucky enough and blessed enough to be able to take advantage of. But taxes are the biggest expense you will ever have in your life. So figuring out ways to not pay more than is necessary is important. So it's fascinating to me. So I want to open it up for needs and wants. So if you have a project, if you're looking for a partner, if you just want to get up here and mention what it is, just take a minute or two. If anyone in here has something, I like to give people the opportunity. Yes? Brent? Come on up. Come on up. Brent Foley from Dollar Zing.
If only in Puerto Rico does somebody bring the rum to you immediately.
That is a tradition here from the airport. Yeah, thank you, Catherine. Thank you guys for coming out and joining Catherine and Zach's group tonight. So I have a project in Condado, and before I kind of get into it, I just want everyone just to kind of take a step back and really just kind of think about their daily life and how it is in Puerto Rico, and just don't worry about all the problems, right? What you see around you is a place that's very beautiful. It has a lot to offer. There's a lot of incredible people, and there's a lot of difficulties within that as well. And I think as people have come together who are very interesting and innovative, a lot of amazing things happen. I think that's what's happening here in Puerto Rico, and it's a special opportunity that you won't really find anywhere else, anywhere at least in the U.S. So I, working with some of these amazing people and people who have really helped my effort out a lot, both locals and both people who have moved here, on a project that's in Condado. It's revitalization of a plaza. It's called Plaza La Libertad. It's near the Ashford Hospital on Ashford Avenue and Magdalena. The goal for the repurpose and the restoring of the plaza is to be able to really just bring back community to the area. It's a plaza that used to be a restaurant about 5 years ago before Hurricane Maria. It was destroyed afterwards, and it's just been abandoned and neglected since. And it was actually interesting when I saw the plaza. It was still in the same condition from when I first moved here. So I thought, why not do something with it? It was, kind of why I originally moved here, was to help rebuild Puerto Rico and help, revitalize communities. And I saw it as a good opportunity. So I eventually went along on the journey of, speaking with the people that I needed to, and have got to the point to we can actually do the work now. So
Really? You got approval?
yeah, we got approval, we got our contracts, and now, it's just been getting the work and everything lined up to actually, make it happen. And it's been a really good process. I've been doing a lot of work. We are actually looking to start work here in the next week or so of removing of the metal and the pressure washing and repainting. The goal is to be able to finish it before the end of March. And it's really just a simple cleanup to the plaza. To people can use it daily, as a public access. We can host events there. We can host farmers markets, flea markets, art nights that they have done on Thursdays. Here in the past, I've heard of some traditions, and just really be able to bring things like that back to a place that was thriving, like how it was before RIEA. And ultimately, with this plaza, my real goal is to make this one successful and to bring it to other communities around in Puerto Rico. So I'm up here with the thanks of Catherine's and Zach's platform.
And Brent, you've been working on this for months and months, getting the approvals. Because you can't just go and just clean up stuff. You actually have to go through a huge process of approvals and bureaucracy.
No, you do, and as I'm sure a lot of you have known and experienced, that things in Puerto Rico tend to work a little bit slower. But at the same time, I feel like because of how things work in Puerto Rico, you could just go there and start fixing it up, and they're like, "Oh, thank you," whatever. So, but no, we've been doing it the very legal way of going about it, and now that's why I wanted to come up here tonight and.
I know you're raising money, and it's Act 60 compliant for anyone who has to make a donation. How close are you to your goal? What you want to share? What you're raising?
Yeah, so we are raising. Our goal is to raise about $44,000 for the whole plaza, and that's to be able to cover all the work that is needed. We are working with a nonprofit here in Puerto Rico, Global Focus, and also working with Robbie as well, Robbie Krager. And it's the goal is to raise money and to just ask all community to be able to help and support, from local businesses to all the local people who live in the area, and for people who are Act 60, it is a required or acceptable nonprofit for your tax requirements. And so if you guys would be willing to support, you can go to plazalawlibertad.com and you will be able to see the give page on Global Focus. And we also have a proposal about it, which is on Dollar Zing, and we have a Dollar Zing webpage, which we'll be kind of linking in, and it gives a little bit more of information of what we're doing and what we're trying to bring and start some community and culture back into the area.
That's great. Can I ask you one other question? Do you have a day or dates that you've set aside where maybe people can volunteer and be part of the physical cleanup of this?
Yeah. So for Volunteers Days, we're going to be setting those up. I'm going to be starting a group chat here soon and WhatsApp, and be sharing it in the other WhatsApp groups, so people can stay up to date and informed and kind of know, hey, what are some of the needs that may be connecting to, people can help out in different ways. We're going to be hiring some people to do the first initial steps of removing the metal and the pressure washing. Where the real work is and the real time is going to be spent is the painting of the plaza. So that is where we're going to ask and schedule volunteer days for anyone who's welcome to or who wants to come out and participate and help paint the plaza.
Awesome.
And this is something that Act 2022 people can donate to, and it's a qualified donation thing. Isn't
Yep.
there a requirement with Act 22 that they have to give a certain amount of money?
Yeah, for people who are Act 20, 22, or 60, depending on what year you filed, you donate either $5,000 or $10,000 annually donation. And Global Focus is a qualified nonprofit for those donations. So any nonprofit or any donation that you make, you can write off for your tax exemptions, as well as for anyone who donates through businesses or other. I mean, it's you can always write it off as a tax write-off. Yep.
Awesome. Exciting project.
Thank you. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any needs or wants? Want to come on up? Hey there. There you go.
All right, thank you. Thank
Sure.
you, Catherine. Hey guys, how's it going tonight? My name is Eric. I'm over here today because, well, Robert knows I have some land in a town called Patillas. That's in the southeast area of Puerto Rico. That area is really well known for this beach called Playa Inche, which is very well known for locals for surfing that area. So I have 15 acres that I'm managing within my own property and my family's property there. I came to Puerto Rico 3 months ago from New York, and I've been cleaning up the spot. It's just a lot of grass and everything. I've been cleaning it up. I have a lot of cattle in there right now in the area. Originally, it was 25 acres. That was my grandma's house. My grandmother's house, they made it into like a Airbnb hotel stuff. So that's rented. It's the management taking care of that. So I have the other part of the land, which is all clean. There's nothing there now. It's just, again, grass and cattle. And I'm trying to get something developed there. I have a couple different ideas, but I know some people are looking for some land, some farmland, many different ideas that whatever you have, come and talk to me. And again, it's an area of Puerto Rico that not too many people go to because it's Patillas. That's in the southeast. Everybody's going towards the west area, and this is like virgin area. Nobody's touching this spot, and it's a great surface asylum, which is what I'm trying to shoot for. And it's very much for the locals. A lot of the locals are in that area. There's a lot of what they call chinchorreos. So it's like little like bars and restaurants. And it's all in the coast area. This area called Guandarraya. And it's a lot of little restaurants, bars. It's a really fun area. It's one of those hidden gems. And also another thing about Patillas is known as La Esmeralda del Sur, which means the emerald of the south. Because if you're in the sea, right, when you look at the mountains and everything, it's all very green. To the opposite of the west side of the island, which is more dry. So this area is like very colorful. It's real pretty. So yeah, if anybody's interested, just come up and give me a talk, okay?
Can you give your number, please?
Sure, I'll give my number right now, and that is 646-207-1775. Should I repeat it again? I'll repeat it one more time. 646-207-1775. Yeah, just hit me up, give me a call, and we can keep conversating about it, all right? Cool.
It's an active farm, right? So you said your grandmother's house is rented to the guy. He's got a farm there. He's doing farm-to-table stuff, and you guys could join in on that?
Yeah, the guy next door, he's doing farming and stuff like that. You know, there's like a swimming pool there. They have like this like kind of resort hotel kind of like thing going on, which is the house where I grew up in. But again, that's all rented out, that area. So my land is the farmland. Yeah.
It's right on the beach. You could do a hospitality play, glamping there.
Exactly. Yeah.
All kinds of possibilities.
Totally. Oh, that's another thing I forgot to say. It's beachfront property. And this is on route number 3, so this is very easy to get there. It's only an hour, 15 minutes from San Juan, from over here. So it's very easy to get there. You could go through Calle, or you could go through the Humacao area, which is the coastline. It's real pretty. And again, the beaches from where I am to like where the doors are. That's how I'm already in the beach from where my land is at.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's private beach too. There's nobody there. It's all private. Cool.
All right, awesome.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks for sharing.
agree with this. Catherine, Robbie, and I have that property. I'm pretty motivated to sell. I don't know about them for sure, but you could even buy my part out, partner with Robbie and Catherine, or I'm not sure how that would work. But anyway, if you have any interest, it's a little 22-unit hotel. Has some really cool features just right catty corner from here.
It's literally like you could go out the door and look. It's right
Yeah,
across
it's
the street.
purple one. The whole building is a purple mural. But you can see it right there. But anyway, if you have interest in being own it or be a part of it, I know with mine, I know the finance, so just talk to me. And I know Rob, he's busy as well. Catherine, I don't know where you are, but anyway.
Right here. I'm right here. So, we have this breakfast meeting every single Saturday at 7:30 in the morning. And the reason we do it at 7:30 in the morning is we actually want only the motivated people to show up. And so, don't drink Friday night, show up and talk real estate. Well, from that breakfast club, this particular deal came about. Zachary, do you want to come up and talk about this tokenization project? We're closing on one of these properties in a couple days.
This is the last deal we got at the Breakfast Club, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Since this one has come, we've had 6 weeks of no deals.
Yeah.
That's because we
I
got to
was
finish
bragging
this one.
before that, like every week you guys would bring deals to the house.
Yeah,
This is
field
fun.
trips.
So,
every
It's
Saturday.
true, yeah. So these are two properties that we're going to put in a fund and tokenize it. So they're two mixed-use properties, one in Caguas, one in Santurce on Calle Monserrate. So they're really similar in like the layout and everything. There are 7 units on the second through third story, and then we're going to do a rooftop bar concept, or I'm sorry, a rooftop concept. That's another project. My bad. I'm getting confused. We're going to do a laundromat on the commercial first floor in Caguas, and then we're going to do something really unique. We're going to do like a mid-level lease, which is something that's unavailable right now in Puerto Rico. People that are moving over here, Act 60, need to get need to get a lease in order to get a bank account, in order to start their decree with Act 60 and everything. The only way to do that right now is to get a long-term lease. So we want to create a product hitting that middle market. So not short-term, not long-term, but right in the middle. So 3 months is the minimum. And we think we can charge a premium for this. So it's really unique. We're going to get these two properties together. We're going to create a fund and we're going to tokenize it. So if anyone is interested in any more details, I can provide you a pitch deck. And these ROIs we're looking at 20%, which is nice for Puerto Rico, right? It's really nice for the States. So we're looking at investors outside and inside. This is a cool project. We're looking to get like a small amount of people, 10, to contribute in this and tokenize real estate here in Puerto Rico, which is right on the cutting edge. So it should be really exciting, and it should be a really cool product. Something kind of meat and potatoes that we've proved the concept with PR consultants and Robbie Krager before. They have over 500 doors here on the island. They've been here 4 years, so something really simple, meat and potatoes, and it's really cool because it can combine 2 different markets. Not a lot of investors are looking at Caguas, and then here in Santurce, that's obviously developing, so you can kind of combine the two and get some good yields. So if you'd like to know more about that, hit me up. And was there anything else? Cool.
We need to close next week, so
Oh,
if
yeah.
you are interested,
It's quite a deadline.
So get out your checkbook.
Yeah.
we're ready.
And of course, we don't promise returns. And I like to say at every meeting, as we close up, if you heard anything here today that makes sense to you, great. You always have to do your due diligence on your deals and your partners. So don't believe me, don't believe anyone here. Do your own homework. And come to our Saturday morning breakfast club. And otherwise, we'll see you next month. Thank you for coming.